I'm Bryan Hyde, and I'm telling it like it is. Germany in the 1930s was a really scary place. They had concerns about economics. For instance, they were suffering huge hyperinflation. A wheelbarrow full of money wouldn't buy you a loaf of bread. They had the threat of communism. The Bolsheviks had taken over Russia and were going to take over the world. And they had the threat of terrorism. In 1933, someone firebombed the German parliament building. Scary things, all these crises hitting all at once. It's almost understandable that the German people, in the midst of those crises, would turn to a strong, charismatic leader who could help them find safety, who could help them find stature again among the nations of the world. Adolf Hitler was the man. And in return for making Germany a good place, a safe place, all he asked was that they give him greater flexibility in the political power that he was able to exercise. In other words, give me enough power and I will take care of your problems. And of course the German people agreed. Of course that led some places that they really would rather have not gone a few years later, but no one saw that at first. It was done very incrementally. Now there were Germans who saw early on that things were not as they should be. Sophie Scholl and the members of the White Rose Society were one of those groups. And unlike a majority of Germans, when they saw what was being done in their name, they spoke out. The White Rose Society didn't just spring into existence the moment that Hitler took power, because Hitler didn't take his mask off right at first. Things were done incrementally. The Jews and the other so-called undesirables first were marginalized by innuendo. Next, there was actual legal sanction or laws that were made forbidding doing business with the Jews and so forth. And finally came the direct action of rounding them up for extermination. Along the way, Sophie Scholl, her brother Hans, and a group of friends calling themselves the White Rose Society recognized the evils that were being done in their name. This was especially driven home when one of Sophie's friends, who was a nurse, saw a bunch of mentally retarded children taken away for extermination. Her conscience couldn't be quiet any longer, and so they began printing pamphlets urging the German people to stop supporting Hitler. Of course, this was very much against the law, and the Gestapo exhausted its efforts in looking for them. And in February of 1943, after leaving pamphlets at the University of Munich, Sophie, her brother Hans, and their friend Christoph Probst were caught by the Gestapo. They were interrogated. She was given a chance. She was given an out, told that, look, your brother has confessed and told us you were just an innocent part of this. You had no idea what was going on. And because the Nazis were very good record keepers, we have word-for-word transcripts of her interrogation as well as their trial. Sophie thought for a moment and said, I did it. And I'm glad I did it. I would do it again. And so she and her brother and Christoph were put on trial. At the trial, as decorated German officers, war veterans, hardened men, cowered in silence, Sophie Scholl was asked why she had participated in this act of disloyalty and terror against the fatherland. Her answer was, someone had to make a start. The reason I'm telling you this story is because there are parallels that exist between us and pre-Nazi Germany. That's an unpleasant thought for some to consider. But consider some of the threats that we face. Economic unrest, the threat of terrorism, government expanding its ability to deal with threats in ways that could ultimately harm not just our liberty, but everyone's liberty. Just this last week, our government openly and brazenly claimed the power to take anyone into custody anywhere on the globe, including American citizens, and to keep them indefinitely, without due process, with no trial, with no evidence. If there was a time when German citizens had the chance to speak up and they chose not to, how many do you suppose regretted remaining silent? If there is a time right now for us to stand up and make a start, as Sophie Scholl suggested, would this not be the time? I'm Bryan Hyde, and I'm telling it like it is.